I'd like to welcome everybody to our Sunday service, especially our guests and visitors. We have some programs at the Expanding Light. We have had a Kriya initiation weekend with 7 new Kriya Bandhs, Kriya initiates here. Congratulations and blessings. And we've also just finished up a Radiant Health week-long program. I think we've all been seeing some of you radiantly healthy people running and walking around Ananda. It's a wonderful program. Everything I hear is so good about it. I'd like to introduce the two of us. My name is Dave Warner. This is my wife, Maria. We're residents here at Ananda Village. This week's reading is from Rays of the One Light, Weekly Commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This week's topic, what is it to fail spiritually? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. The first passage is from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 25. Jesus tells the parable of the 10 virgins, 5 of them wise and 5 foolish. They await their bridegroom, the Christ consciousness. The wise virgins keep the oil in their lamps, symbolic of their devotion, lit through the night. The foolish virgins placed no oil in their lamps. These foolish ones are like the average devotee, going through the motions of outer ritual, but keeping no fire of love burning in their heart. When the bridegroom's coming is announced, the foolish virgins realize their mistake and hasten out to purchase oil. During their absence, the Christ consciousness comes and embraces those who have been awaiting him with devotion. The foolish ones, by their lackluster devotion, are not accepted by him. Watch, therefore, Jesus told his listeners, for you know neither the day nor the hour wherein the Son of Man cometh. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramhansa Yogananda describes the foolish virgin consciousness he encountered in the Mahamandal hermitage he stayed in as a young man in Benares. I was pleased, he wrote, that my new home possessed an attic where I managed to spend the dawn and morning hours. The ashram members, knowing little of meditation practices, thought I should employ my whole time in organizational duties. They gave me praise for my afternoon work in their office. Don't try to catch God so soon. This ridicule accompanied one of my early departures toward the attic. Later, during meditation, I felt lifted as though bodily to a sphere uncircumscribed. Thy Master cometh today. A divine womanly voice came from everywhere and nowhere. This supernal experience was pierced by a shout from a definite locale. A young priest nicknamed Habu was calling me from the downstairs kitchen. Mukunda, enough of your meditation. You are needed for an errand. The Divine Mother's words were not spoken for the benefit of that priest, the foolish virgin, but for Mukunda, the wise virgin. For this was the day his guru, Sri Yukteswar, came to him. Grieve not, friends, if you feel that you have been foolish. No error is forever. Someday, if you keep your lamp lit now, your opportunity will come. In the Bhagavad Gita, the 6th chapter, Krishna promises every devotee, Arjuna, none who works for self-redemption will ever meet an evil destiny. Spiritual failure, though a deep disappointment, is always temporary. Eternal hellfire is but a projection of vindictiveness in the human mind. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to read from The Whispers from Eternity, a book of spiritual poems by Paramahansa Yogananda, edited by Swami Kriyananda. We have a new edition here. O Divine Sculptor, chisel thou my life. Every sound that I make, let it have the vibration of thy voice. Every thought that I think, let it be saturated with the consciousness of thy presence. Let every feeling that I have glow with thy love. Let every act of my will be impregnated with thy divine vitality. Let every thought, every expression, every ambition be ornamented by thee. O Divine Sculptor, chisel thou my life according to thy design. Good morning, everybody. It's our joy to be here with you on a beautiful morning at Ananda. I'd like to share something with you. It's a statement I came across many years ago when I was noodling around the internet, as I do, part of my job. And it had to do with the code of conduct for the United States Armed Forces. This is not something that I read usually, but as I said, I came across it and it really made a profound impression on me. The Code of Conduct for the United States Armed Forces in this particular instant had to do with what is expected of our soldiers in the event of capture. Again, this is not something we ordinarily think about in our lives. We live in peaceful times, more or less, at least here. But like I said, it made a very, very deep impression on me. And as I was reading about what the military expects of its members in the event of capture, I started thinking, what if, you run through these scenarios in your mind sometimes. What would I do if I found myself imprisoned by the enemy? And I ran through the scenario, and let me tell you, it had nothing to do with what the Code of Conduct actually said. What I was thinking would be expected of somebody like me was to survive, You find yourself in very adverse circumstances. There's prison guards out there. You're probably interrogated and tortured, and you just try to make the best of it. Stash a little food under the mattress. Keep your head down. Do not antagonize the guards. And, if you're lucky, someday you might be rescued. But if not, you just make the best out of what you're given. Now, this is not what I read in the Code of Conduct. I was very, very impressed with what I did read. The Code of Conduct for U.S. Armed Forces says this: if I am captured, I will continue to resist by all means available. I will make every effort to escape and aid others to escape. I have to say I'm very proud to be a member of this country. It made a profound impression on me. Why? Because very much like the US military, the lives of devotees depend on our ability to resist the forces of delusion and to escape those forces that keep us away from our unity with God. There really is no much difference once you think about it. Now, the statement I came across is very, very clear. It was not made in the form of suggestion. It didn't say, well, you can stroll around the guard tower and see if there is any chinks in the fence. And, you can consider or think about escaping. But if not, you can go to plan B. There is no such plan for the US military. There is no plan B for a devotee either. And this is something that we need to understand really deeply within ourselves, because on a beautiful day like this, sitting in a beautiful temple in the company of wonderful devotees, it can be easy to imagine that we are in fact free and to be content with our present condition. There is a very interesting story I heard about the life of Rajarsi Janakananda, who was Yogananda's most advanced disciple. He was a master in his own right, which means he was in the state of ecstasy all the time. And one of the younger monks in Yogananda's ashram probably didn't have quite the courage to come up to the master himself and ask for it, but decided, I'm a disciple, Rajarsi is a disciple, let's say I'll try my luck with him. So he came up to Rajarsi and said, can you give me samadhi? And it is a very good question. I wouldn't mind asking it myself if I had a chance. And Rajarsi's answer was very interesting. I would expect, I always have my own interpretations of how things should be. I would expect him to say, well, someday, son, you just go back, meditate some more, you're not quite ready, someday. He didn't say that. What he did say was, sure, I can give you ecstasy, I can give you samadhi, but because you're not able to sustain that state by your own merit, you'll have to go back to your ordinary, normal existence, and you will not be able to stand it. And you'd think, well, what's wrong with his existence? He's not starving somewhere in Africa, he's not ill, he's not imprisoned, we think. I mean, he is a disciple practicing the teachings of our master just like we do. In the ashram of his guru, just like we do, just like we live. In the presence of other devotees. I mean, out of all types of existences in this world, this is the best way to live. This really is the absolute best that this world can offer. And yet, Rajarsi told him, you would not be able to stand it. Because the difference between the state of oneness in God and our normal, usual state of existence is so great. Now, what is wrong with this? What is wrong with us, basically? Once I started thinking about it, it occurred to me that living as we are in a free country, for which I'm very, very grateful, and living in the ashram of our guru, if we are fortunate to do so, or even practicing the teachings, which we're very fortunate to do so, wherever we live, we're still imprisoned by the forces that I mentioned that keep us from finding out our unity with God. The prison guards are many, and they're very familiar. One of them, the chief one, is the ego, isn't it? The ego rules through the time-honored policy of divide and conquer. And the ego, the sense of egoity, is that sense of separateness that tells me I'm very different from Peter and from Tim and from my husband and from the trees that are out there and from the sky and nature and, most of all, from God. I'm separate and I stand alone. And because I stand alone, I need to protect myself from everybody and everything. And everything that happens to me personally. That's the sense of egoity. I was in the doctor's office just a few days ago. talking to a medical student. In the process of his training, he wanted to talk to me about my medical history from day one. And because that's, going back 50 years, it took a while. And so as we were talking, I found myself getting more and more tense. And at some point, he stepped out of the office, and so I had a little moment to myself, and I asked myself, Maria, why are you getting so tense? And I realized it's because as I was going through, gosh, and that happened, and man, and then that happened, oh boy, that was really bad. I was thinking, I'm talking about myself, and I was getting, and then I just said to myself, relax. It's not happening to you, it didn't happen to you, it's just happened. And I just had a sense of relaxation. When he came back, I was a different person. We went over the rest of the interesting medical history just from the purely scientific standpoint. He was very impressed. And so the ego tells us, I rule. And yet, as devotees, we know that the only way to progress spiritually is to relax that sense of self-identity, is to relax and surrender the ego. Now, the ego doesn't rule alone. It has cohorts. It's got minions running under him, and some of those minions are the senses. Now, the senses are a greedy bunch. They really are. The more we try to please them, the more we try to satisfy them, the more demanding they get. We all know that. They also feed us false information. They tell us, you need, each one of us, to experience the world and to find your place in the world and to know what's real and what's not. And they lie. That is not true. We all know, for those of us who practice meditation, the very first step in meditation is to reverse the energy that's going from its center in the spine out to the senses and just cut off those sense telephones, as Yogananda used to call them, so that we can begin to experience a deeper reality that is our own nature and our soul. So the senses are not our friends, even though they tell us they are. As Yogananda said, ever more fed, never satisfied. And the information that they feed us, as I said, it's false, because it says this is solid, and it's getting a little bit warm here, and therefore I'm beginning to parse that information that's constantly coming to me. Parse is a geek speak. It means process or separate. I'm beginning to separate all this information that's coming to me from the senses into, this is nice, I don't like that. This feels good, ouch, that hurts. And so all these guards, the prison guards, basically torture us on a daily basis. They really do. Some days are a little better than others. Now, that is the problem, because some days you really think, well, I could live with this. It's not so bad. I had a very interesting dream once, and in the dream somebody who is very, very dear to me was in the prison, and I watched her being tortured by the guards, and it broke my heart. She was inside, I was just out watching. And you want to do something in situations like this, and so I hatched a plan in my dream that I was going to switch places with her. I was going to go in, take her place, they will let her go, and then a little voice said to me, but then you're going to get tortured. Now, what fun is in that? But I had a ready answer in my dream. I thought, well, I'm going to make friends with the guards. I'm going to be so nice to them. They're really, really, really going to like me. And they won't torture me so bad. I know they will torture me some, but maybe not so bad. I'll make do. It'll be fine. I'll just be so nice to them. Now, the dream progressed, but I want to stop right here, because I don't want us to ever think that we can make friends with delusion. There is no plan B. This is very important for us to understand. And most people in the world do try to accommodate, to make do with the state of imprisonment. Most of people in the world think if I only get a better job, a little bit more money, a different spouse, if I just keep my head down, I will make do with what I've got. And very, very few people strive for what is our birthright, which is Satchidananda, ever-existing, ever-new, ever-conscious bliss. How many people in this world ask for bliss? They basically ask for a little less suffering. But it's very important for us to remember as devotees that there is no in-between. There is no plan B. Think about the story of the Mahabharata. Many of us know about it, and the Bhagavad Gita, the scripture that we read every Sunday, is a part of that story. And in the story of the Mahabharata, the 5 princes, the Pandavas, which symbolize the soul qualities of each one of us here, lost their birthright, their inheritance of oneness with God, because they were tricked by the bad guys. The bad guys symbolize the forces that try to keep us separate from God. They were tricked by the bad guys into a game of dice, and they gambled their inheritance away. And as part of their punishment, they were sent out into exile in very, very humble circumstances. Remember, those were princes. And after they served their term in exile, they came back and asked politely from the bad guys. It's like going to the mafia and saying, excuse me, we're back, we've done what you've told us to do, may we please have our kingdom back? Our soul begins to wake up after years and lifetimes of being banished from its home in God, and we try to reclaim our status as children of God. And of course, you know what the bad guys do in such a case. They say, excuse me, we rule the kingdom, and who are you? And so the Pandavas, being noble characters, went back and regrouped and came back to the bad guys, the Kauravas, with a counter-proposal. And I said, we really don't want any trouble. You know, we understand the kingdom is gone, you rule the kingdom, that's fine. Just give us a village, just a little corner of the world where we can just live peacefully. We won't cause trouble, we'll never ask for anything more. We'll make peace with the guards. Just leave us alone and we will be content. And this is what we do. We try to make do with our state of limitations. And of course, we know the answer that was given to the Pandavas, which was, we will not give you as much land as can be covered by a straw. No plan B. You'll have to fight to get your kingdom back. We have to fight to get our kingdom back also. Now, I remember a statement that Swami Kriyananda made once. Those of you who know Swamiji, as we call him affectionately here, know that he's a very, very accommodating person. He's very patient and very compassionate and infinitely understanding of devotees who are sincerely trying to make spiritual progress. And the reason why I remember this particular instant is because his answer was so contrary to how he usually works with people. He was so uncompromising. It had to do with a disciple who was here for many years and was a very dear friend of many people here. And at some point, he decided to leave. Not just to move away from Ananda village and, which happens. That's nothing wrong with that. He actually decided to leave the spiritual path. It was a conscious decision. Now, we think that saints and masters are quote-unquote above it all, but actually their sense of compassion and their sense of love is a lot keener than that of an ordinary person, because their awareness is pure and refined. And in fact, there is a story about Yogananda weeping, actual tears once, when one of the disciples left his ashram. And so Swami Kriyananda was sad about this person, and so were the rest of us. And we were trying to make sense, why would somebody who was actually quite close to him would make such a decision? And one of us said to Swamiji, well, you know, sir, maybe he just needed to go out and experience the world and learn the lessons from the world. And I thought to myself, you know what? That makes perfect sense. I mean, it really sounds very reasonable to me. But Swamiji's response was so stern. He said, no. The only answer is God. There is no other answer. And I remembered that. No plan B. Not for anyone. Certainly not for a sincere disciple. So, how do we get out of the prison? Nice as it may be, still a prison. How do we make our escape? Well, we do so with the help of the Guru, isn't it? For the disciples of our path, the Guru is Paramahansa Yogananda, and the rest of the lovely characters you see on the altar. If you don't have a Guru, don't worry about it. Just cultivate your desire for God. God supplies the Guru. Our part is to want to be free, is to want to be reunited with God. The Guru, very simply, is that soul that had been imprisoned in the same prison where we are now, made his escape, found the way out into freedom, and then, get this, came back into the concentration camp with the sole purpose of helping others to escape. Goes back to the code of conduct. I will make every effort to escape and aid others to escape. That's all they do. That's the entire purpose of the saints and masters coming back to this world, is to help us make our escape to freedom. And our part in this is to offer every bit of cooperation with them. They are like the agitators that walk around the prison camp and say, don't be content. Look out there, there is freedom just behind the fence. Wake up, you deserve so much more. Why do they have this burning desire to help us? Because being one with God, they understand that it is God's wish to be reunited with us. Now, this whole setup of the bad guys, the good guys, the delusion, is really brought to us by none other than God. It is He that set it up in such a way that we will never be happy, we will never be satisfied, we will never be left alone and in peace, as long as we are in a state of duality or delusion. He wants us to Himself, basically. That's what it comes down to. And we want Him too. Sometimes we know it, sometimes we don't. And the role of the Guru is to awaken that desire in ourselves, to reclaim our birthright, and to show us how, and to give us practices and techniques that will prepare ourselves for the journey, that will expand our consciousness, that will purify us so that we can receive God. And we absolutely need to offer our 100% cooperation, loyalty, and devotion to the Guru. It's very inspiring to see so many examples on the spiritual path at Ananda of people who are really understanding this principle of 100% dedication to the spiritual path. And I would say the most inspiring example, of course, is Swami Kriyananda, and I'll tell you why. It's not just because he's the founder of Ananda. It's not just because when you look at him, you get a feeling that this man is in a state of grace and bliss. For me, probably the most inspiring point about his life is what he did with his life when he was dismissed, after he was dismissed from his guru's organization. Because again, I play the same scenario. What if I was in his shoes? You are penniless, no friends, no marketable skills, in your mid-30s. All of a sudden, your life is no longer what you knew it. And what would I do? On the one hand, you have the need to quote-unquote survive, get a job, go work in an office, make a salary, find an apartment. On the other hand, you have your guru who had told you your life is going to be writing and lecturing, and you also have a great work to do, and I will give you the strength to do it. So who do you follow? The little I, the ego that says, you gotta take care of number one, you stand alone, come on, be practical? Or do you have the courage to follow the guru and say, I will do what he told me. I don't know how, no matter what it takes, I will follow my guru's advice. And because he did, because he had the courage to do so, we're sitting here today. There would be no Ananda otherwise. So that is one of the examples that I'm very, very grateful to. We had a beautiful Kriya ceremony here in this temple just last night. And for those of you who have ever been in a Kriya ceremony, you know that the very last thing we do at the closing of the Kriya initiation ceremony is we leave the temple without turning our back to the altar. So basically back out like this. And that is very, very symbolic of our lives as devotees. Never turn your back to the Guru. Never turn your back to God who has come to you through the Guru. Never settle for anything less than that Satchidananda, perfect freedom, perfect bliss, are a birthright. And I would like to close with reading from Conversations with Yogananda, which is a book of sayings by Yogananda, which were recorded by Swami Kriyananda. Very interesting what he says about it. Evil is a delusion. It is the veil over the bliss nature of the soul. One who turns away from the spiritual path fails to realize that by doing so, he spurns the joy of his own being. The choice before the spiritual aspirant must be taken very seriously. It is no light matter. It does not concern relative stages of fulfillment, lesser versus greater joys, for example. It is far more drastic. It is quite simply a choice between joy and suffering. The choice between seeking God or turning away from Him is absolute. God bless you all.